In a quiet village in Imo State, Nigeria, there lived a girl named Ikom. Ikom was only 10 years old, but she was known for her sharp mind and strong spirit. She loved to climb trees, chase lizards, and play by the river with her friends. The village, surrounded by tall trees and thick forests, was peaceful during the day. But when night fell, a strange fear crept into the hearts of the people. This fear was because of Odogwu Nta, the dreaded masquerade. It was said that Odogwu Nta was not like other masquerades that danced during festivals. This one came out at night and stole young girls. Nobody knew where it took them, and nobody ever saw the girls again. Parents warned their children never to stay outside after sunset, and doors were locked tightly when the sun went down. But one day, something happened that changed Ikom's life forever. It was a bright and sunny afternoon. Ikom and her best friend Ada were playing by the river. The two girls laughed as they splashed water at each other. Ada was telling Ikom a story about a giant fish she claimed to have seen the day before. Ikom, the fish was this big. Ada stretched her hands wide. Ikom laughed. "You're lying, Ada. No fish can be that big in this river. I swear. If you come tomorrow, you'll see it," Ada said, her eyes wide with excitement. Suddenly, they heard the village gong ringing loudly. It was the town crier shouting a warning. "Odogwu Nta is near. Everyone go home. Close your doors," the crier's voice echoed through the village. The girls froze. They looked at each other, fear in their eyes. "Let's go." Ikom grabbed Ada's hand, and they ran as fast as their legs could carry them. That night, Ikom sat close to her mother in their small hut. The fire in the middle of the room flickered, casting shadows on the mud walls. Outside, the wind howled, and the village was eerily quiet. "Ikom, remember, do not open the door for anyone," her mother whispered. "Yes, Mama," Ikom replied, clutching her blanket tightly. As the night deepened, a chilling sound broke the silence. It was the sound of a wooden flute. Everyone in the village knew that sound. It meant Odogwu Nta was close. Ikom's heart pounded. She could feel her mother trembling beside her. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on their door. "Open the door," a deep, raspy voice commanded. It didn't sound human. Ikom's mother shook her head and pressed a finger to her lips. But the banging grew louder and louder. And then, with one final smash, the door flew open. In the doorway stood Odogwu Nta. It was tall, with long flowing robes made of palm fronds. Its face was hidden behind a terrifying wooden mask with sharp teeth painted on it. The sight of it made Ikom scream. Before they could react, the masquerade grabbed Ikom by the arm. Her mother tried to fight it, but it pushed her aside like she was nothing. Ikom kicked and screamed, but the masquerade was too strong. "Help me, Mama!" Ikom cried as she was dragged out of the hut. Her mother's screams echoed behind her, but the masquerade didn't stop. It carried her into the dark forest, its wooden flute still playing its haunting tune. When Ikom opened her eyes, she was in a cave. The walls were wet and covered in strange carvings. A dim, flickering light came from a small fire in the middle of the cave. Around her were other girls, about 6 of them. They were all crying. "Where are we?" Ikom asked one of the girls. "This is the den of Odogwu Nta," the girl replied, sobbing. "No one ever escapes." Ikom's heart sank. She looked around and saw the masquerade sitting by the fire. It was sharpening a long knife. Ikom shivered. "What does it want with us?" she asked. The girl shook her head. "I don't know. But we must leave before it's too late." Ikom refused to give up. She was scared, but she knew she had to find a way out. She quietly crawled to the edge of the cave and saw a small opening. It was narrow, but it looked like it led outside. She whispered to the other girls, "I found a way out. We need to move now." One of the older girls shook her head. "No, we can't. It will catch us." Ikom clenched her fists. "If we stay, it will still get us. I'm not waiting here." The girls hesitated, but fear kept most of them frozen. Only one small girl, Neka, agreed to follow Ikom. Ikom and Neka waited until the masquerade fell asleep. Its loud, raspy snores filled the cave. Quietly, they crept toward the small opening. Ecom went first, squeezing through the narrow gap. The sharp rocks scratched her arms and legs, but she didn't stop. Neka followed close behind. Just as they reached the other side, a loud roar came from the cave. "You cannot escape me," the masquerade bellowed. It had woken up and seen them. Ecom grabbed Neka's hand and they ran. The forest was dark, and the trees seemed to close in around them. They could hear the heavy footsteps of the masquerade chasing them. Its flute began to play again, the haunting tune filling the air. "Don't stop," Com shouted. But as they ran, Ecom tripped on a root and fell. Neka stopped to help her, but it was too late. The masquerade was upon them. Ecom knew they couldn't outrun it. Thinking quickly, she picked up a sharp stick from the ground and held it tightly. As the masquerade reached for her, she jabbed the stick into its wooden mask. The masquerade let out a horrible scream and stumbled back. "Run, Neka," Com shouted. "Go." Neka hesitated, but Ecom pushed her. "Go now." As Neka ran, the masquerade turned its attention back to Ecom. It was furious. It grabbed her and covered her face with its hands. Ecom screamed as a blinding pain shot through her eyes. Then everything went dark. When Ecom woke up, she was lying on the ground. The sun was rising, and she could hear the sound of villagers calling her name. She tried to open her eyes, but she couldn't see anything. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was blind. "Ecom! Ecom!" someone shouted. It was her mother. She ran to Ecom and held her tightly. "My daughter, what happened to you?" her mother cried. I escaped," Ecom whispered. "But I can't see." The villagers carried her back to the village. Neka had made it home safely and told everyone what had happened. Ecom was hailed as a hero for her bravery. But her heart was heavy. She had lost her sight, and the other girls were still missing. Ecom's life changed after that day. She could no longer climb trees or chase lizards, but her spirit remained strong. She learned to navigate the village without her sight, and she became a symbol of hope for the people. The villagers, inspired by Ecom's courage, came together to hunt for Odogwu Nta. They set traps in the forest and searched the masquerade's den. Although the masquerade was never seen again, Ecom's bravery had united the village and brought hope to many. And so, the story of the blind girl who escaped the masquerade became a legend, told for generations to come. Ecom may have lost her eyes, but she gained something far greater: her freedom and the admiration of her people. Weeks passed after Ecom's escape, but the village remained tense. Though the masquerade had vanished, the fear it left behind still lingered. Parents kept their children closer than ever, and the village elders organized nightly watches to guard against any sign of Odogwu Nta. Ecom's blindness was a heavy burden, but she refused to let it break her spirit. She spent her days helping her mother in the hut, weaving mats and listening to the stories of the villagers who came to visit her. Everyone called her brave, but deep inside, Ecom was haunted. She could still hear the eerie sound of the masquerade's flute in her dreams. One evening, as the village prepared for nightfall, Ecom sat by the fire, listening to her mother hum a quiet song. Suddenly, Neka burst into their hut, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Ecom!" Neka gasped. "It's back! I heard the flute near the river." Ecom's heart froze. "Are you sure?" Neka nodded quickly. "I swear it. I was fetching water and I heard it. The same sound from that night." Ecom clenched her fists. The masquerade wasn't gone after all. The next day, the village elders held a meeting in the square. Everyone gathered, whispering nervously. The chief, an old man with a white beard, raised his hand for silence. "We have received troubling news," he said. "Odogwu Nta has returned. It must be stopped before it takes more of our children." The villagers murmured in agreement, but fear filled their voices. Ecom, guided by her mother, stepped forward. The crowd grew silent as they saw her. "I will help," Ecom said firmly. The chief frowned. "Ecom, you have already suffered so much. How can you help when you cannot see?" I may be blind, Ecom replied, but I know the sound of its flute. I know the path to its den. If we don't act now, more girls will be taken. The villagers were hesitant, but they knew Ecom was right. Finally the chief nodded. Very well, but you will not go alone. We will send warriors with you. That night, under the light of a full moon, a group of villagers prepared to enter the forest. Ecom was at the front, holding a long stick to guide her steps. Beside her was Ada, who had insisted on coming. You're not doing this alone, Ada whispered, squeezing Ecom's hand. The group carried torches and machetes, their eyes scanning the shadows. The forest was alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves, but every now and then Ecom would hear it, the faint, haunting tune of the masquerade's flute. Do you hear it? She whispered to Ada. Yes, Ada replied, her voice shaking. It's coming from the west. Com nodded. That's the way to its den. The group moved cautiously, following the sound. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The trees seemed to close in around them, their twisted branches casting eerie shadows. Stay close, one of the warriors whispered. It could be watching us. After what felt like hours, they reached the cave. The entrance loomed before them, dark and foreboding. The sound of the flute was louder now, echoing from within. This is it, Ecom said, her voice steady. The warriors lit more torches and entered the cave, their footsteps echoing on the damp floor. The air was thick with the smell of decay. Strange carvings covered the walls, just as Ecom remembered. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the darkness. You dare return to my domain. The warriors froze, their torches flickering. From the shadows, Odogwu Nta emerged, its wooden mask glinting in the firelight. It carried a staff adorned with skulls, and its eyes glowed a sinister red. Ecom felt a shiver run down her spine. Even though she couldn't see, she could feel its presence, heavy, cold, and full of malice. Leave now, or you will never see the light again, the masquerade growled. But Ecom stepped forward, her chin held high. You don't scare me, she said. You took my sight, but you won't take my courage. The masquerade let out a deafening roar and lunged at the group. The warriors shouted and swung their machetes, but the masquerade was fast. It moved like a shadow, dodging their strikes and countering with its staff. Ecom stood to the side, listening carefully. The sound of the flute was still playing, but now she noticed something strange. The tune seemed to come from two places at once. Ada, Com shouted. There's another flute. Find it. Ada hesitated, then ran toward the sound. Meanwhile, the warriors continued to fight, their torches lighting up the cave in bursts. Ecom gripped her stick tightly, her ears straining to catch every sound. Suddenly, she heard a faint whistle above her. She ducked just in time as the masquerade staff swung over her head. You cannot defeat me, blind girl, the masquerade sneered. Come smirk. We'll see about that. Ada's voice rang out from deeper in the cave. Ecom, I found something. Ecom turned toward the sound. What is it? It's another mask, Ada said, her voice shaking. And it's playing the flute. Realization dawned on Ecom. Destroy it, Ada. Quickly. Ada hesitated, but then she grabbed a rock and smashed the mask. The flute stopped abruptly, and the masquerade let out a horrible scream. Its movements became sluggish, and its glowing eyes dimmed. What have you done? It roared, stumbling toward Ada. But the warriors seized the opportunity. With a final swing of their machetes, they struck the masquerade down. Its wooden mask cracked and fell to the ground, revealing nothing but darkness beneath. The group left the cave victorious, carrying Ecom on their shoulders. The village erupted in cheers when they returned. For the first time in years, the fear of Odogwu Nta was gone. Ecom couldn't see their smiles, but she felt their joy. She had faced her greatest fear and come out stronger. From that day on, the village celebrated Ecom as a hero. And though she couldn't see the stars, she knew they shone brighter because of her bravery. The news of Odogwu Nta's defeat spread beyond the small village, reaching other towns and villages in Imo State. People from far and wide came to see the blind girl who had faced the dreaded masquerade and survived. They came to touch her hands, hear her story, and give thanks for her bravery. Ecom, though still young, became a symbol of hope. Children whispered her name with awe, and elders spoke of her courage during moonlit storytelling nights. The village elders decided to honor her by declaring a special day called Ecom's Day, where people would gather to celebrate bravery and unity. On the first Ecom's Day, the village square was alive with music, dance, and feasting. Ecom sat in the center, her mother by her side. The chief stood before the crowd and raised his staff. Ecom, you have saved our children and our village, the chief declared. You have shown us that even in darkness there is light. From this day forward, you are not just Ecom, the girl from our village. You are Ecom the Fearless, a legend among us. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting her name. Ecom the Fearless. Ecom the Fearless. Despite losing her sight, Ecom's sharp mind and fearless spirit only grew stronger. She became a protector of the village's children, teaching them the importance of courage and kindness. She would gather the children under the big iroko tree and tell them stories, guiding them with lessons from her own life. Fear is like a shadow, she told them one day. It only seems big because we let it grow. But when you face it, it becomes small. The children hung on her every word, inspired by her wisdom. And whenever a child felt scared, whether of the dark, wild animals or strange noises in the forest, they would think of Ecom and stand a little taller. One evening, many months after Odogwu Nta's defeat, Ecom sat with the village elders around a crackling fire. The chief spoke solemnly. Ecom, we have been thinking, he said. Our village has been safe since you defeated the masquerade. But what if there are other evils out there? What if other villages face what we faced? Ecom tilted her head, considering his words. We believe you are destined for more, the chief continued. We will train you to be a guide, a protector. Not just for us, but for all who need help. Ecom felt a spark of excitement. Though she was blind, she had learned to use her other senses. Her hearing, her touch, her instincts. She had faced darkness and survived. She nodded. I will do it. I will protect others. Over the next few years, Ecom trained with the village's best warriors. They taught her how to fight using her hearing and touch. She learned to wield a staff, her movements quick and precise. She could walk the forest paths without hesitation, her bare feet sensing every root and stone. Stories of her skills spread far and wide. Some called her a warrior. Others called her a spirit sent by the gods to protect the innocent. Mothers would tell their children, if you are ever lost in the forest, call Ecom's name, and she will come to guide you. And sometimes when children went missing, villagers would hear whispers of footsteps in the forest and find the lost ones safely returned. No one saw Ecom, but they knew it was her. One fateful year, a neighboring village faced its own terror. A strange creature, half man and half beast, had been attacking their farms and scaring their people. Desperate, they came to Ecom's village for help. We need Ecom the Fearless, they pleaded. She is the only one who can save us. Though Ecom was older now, her spirit was as strong as ever. She agreed to help and set off with a small group of warriors. They tracked the creature deep into the forest, where it had made its lair. Using her sharp hearing and quick reflexes, Ecom led the group in defeating the beast. The villagers celebrated her return with songs and dances, adding another chapter to her growing legend. Years later, when Ecom grew older, the village built a shrine in her honor. It stood beneath the great iroko tree where she had once told stories to children. The shrine became a place of prayer and guidance. Villagers would visit to ask for courage in their own battles, leaving gifts of palm wine, cola nuts, and woven mats. Though Ecom herself no longer roamed the forests, her story continued to inspire. Parents told their children about the blind girl who faced the masquerade and taught the village to be fearless. And whenever the wind rustled through the trees or a flute played softly in the distance, the villagers would smile and say, Ecom is watching over us. Ecom passed away many years later, surrounded by her family and the people who loved her. But her spirit remained alive in the hearts of the villagers. Her name became a symbol of bravery, and her story was passed down from one generation to the next. Even today, in the remote villages of Imo State, children still sit around fires at night, listening to the tale of Ikom the Fearless, the blind girl who faced the darkness and became a legend.